Welcome to COIQ, where you learn how health innovators maximize their success. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy, founder of Legacy DNA and international best-selling author of How Health Innovators Maximize Market Success. Through candid conversations with health innovators, early adopters, and influencers, you'll learn how to bring your innovation from idea to startup to market domination. And now, let's jump into the latest episode of COIQ. Welcome back to the show, COIQ listeners. On today's episode, I have Larry Jasinski with me, who is the CEO of Rewalk Robotics. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's nice to have you here. So let's start off by telling our listeners and viewers a little bit about your background and what you've been innovating these days.
Okay, well, personally, I'm a medical device guy for my career between one big company, Boston Scientific, which was very small, by the way, when I started, and then a few startups since. My passion and my driven approach has been with a company called Rewalk Robotics. And in the end, my decision to do it was driven by a couple doctors I spent time with and then a couple patients. What the fundamental mission of the company is to allow disabled people that are completely paralyzed, partially paralyzed, an ability to walk again. And the impact that has on their life is remarkable. So the creation of a new market with a technology that nothing existed and nothing had changed with wheelchairs for over 2,000 years is really where we are today, and we're making progress.
So Larry, that's hard. Not only creating a technology from scratch or creating a company from scratch, but creating a whole new market. What has that journey been like for you?
Well, at first you think you could do anything because that's the confidence you tend to have when you've had successes and you forget all the times you got hit in the head along the way.
Uh-huh.
This one was more unique than the others I've done, though. I had really nothing near it to follow. When we went to the FDA, we couldn't figure out the pathway. We wanted a certain pathway, but there was no 510K, and we had to do a de novo. And we had to create a de novo category in negotiations with the FDA as opposed to a much larger category. And everything along the way has been just like that. Everything we've done is the first time, establishing codes for payments, establishing methods for use in the field, building the infrastructure. So it's been challenging, harder than we thought, particularly on the payment side, but it's been worth it.
So I like your humility and modesty as you kind of just glazed over some of your successes in the past. So just again, to give a little bit more context, you've had some successful exits throughout your career.
Yeah, I think the formative part of my career was Boston Scientific, and I served in every position from the bottom to the top of a division that at the beginning was about a $9 million revenue group, and by the time I left was $600 million. So the successes that are most measurable are the things I did with that division in all my different roles, which included sales, marketing, R&D, general management of it. So BSC taught me how to bring things to market and how to build markets. So my successes after that, BSC deserves a lot of the credit, and the people that former colleagues frequently from BSC, frankly, that came along with me. So we were able to take a couple of other startups, one that was broken and simply had followed the wrong strategy. We got it profitable. We sold it. Those products are still sold today. I'm glad to see that. And I did another one after that, which also got sold. So I can give more details on those. But this was my third challenge post-BSC. But I'm doing the same thing. I'm creating markets where way back when, interventional radiology, use of stents, for example, if you talked about a stent in 1985, people thought that wasn't a very good idea to put in an artery.
It's hard to believe now.
Yeah. So, there was market development work even then.
So what do you think, having journeyed through this many times, what do you think the biggest differences are between bringing something that's disruptive or radical to market versus, an incremental innovation?
Well, the market reaction, it's easier to do an incremental because so many things are established. And I think in the early days at BSC, we were able to bring things to market more quickly because there were not as many barriers. And some barriers are appropriate, by the way, as the industry's grown. For now, innovation is much harder in that the regulatory paths are more extensive, and correctly, generally. I'm not criticizing.
Sure.
It's just the products have gotten more complex. The payment patterns have gotten particularly difficult. That's been probably the biggest limiter to innovation, because that part of the government and insurance system hasn't figured out how to deal with these things unless you're really big. So it's hard for a small company. And just the available funding is different. The venture capital days where there were a lot of little startups out there are not so prevalent anymore. So trying to create and get it properly funded, and for the length of time you have to do it, is longer and harder than it used to be. But the fundamentals are the same. It's still got to be better for patient. You still have to have data. You still have to work through the FDA, just maybe a little longer. Same with CMS. They're everything's more expensive and takes longer, but it's still good.
So what do you say to other, your peers that are in the trenches right now that are possibly raising money and kind of planning for, taking their company from an idea to something that would be commercially viable? Is there kind of a path that's distinct or different from a radical innovation that doesn't have a market that you have to create, where you would say that this path, you need to have like 10 times the funding and plan for 10 times the time compared to more of a traditional market that's already established?
I think the reality of it is it now begins at the end of the channel, which in the end you should be thinking about what you're selling and how you're selling it. But when I was first at BSC, a lot of little companies had sales forces, and we were able to grow enough to coexist. The consolidation that has occurred and the cost of distribution that has developed makes it much harder to create a company at the back end, the distribution side. And I think a path someone really has to think through is, and I remember one other inventor I worked with said, always have your exit in mind, even if you don't want to exit. Because you really have to think of, I'll make it simple. If you're making a heart valve, there's about 2 companies that are ultimately going to be in that market. So you're going to have to design and plan and probably working with them someday. If you're creating a totally new market where there is no dominant player and no dominant distribution channel, then you have to create one. And rehab, which is the world I'm living in right now, doesn't have the Johnson & Johnson's, Medtronic's, Boston Scientifics of the world. It's an industry that is an earlier stage, I would say, in terms of advancement of technology. So to your question, you've got to really look at where you are, but you do have to pay attention as to where you're going to end up. Are you going to be a standalone company, and is it big enough, and can you get that kind of funding? Or are you really going to have to think of where is the path I'm going to land at the end of the day? And I know I probably have to work with one of these 2 players. And if that's the case, you build your relationships early and constantly say, hey, I'm going to do this, and then you go do it, and then we're doing this, and then you go do it. And you do more strategic alliance type approach, I think, in the bigger markets. I hope that answered your question.
No, absolutely it did. I think that's very valuable. So what do you think the perspective is with the investment community right now in that path? Are you seeing a lot of investment made with ideas and companies as complex, right? Are you seeing investors kind of steer away of like, oh no, there's no market for this. There's going to be this whole regulatory path. Let's just steer away from this type of investment. Or like, yes, someone like yourself's got a proven track record for being able to overcome these hurdles, and that I see the potential for where we could go, not only changing the industry, but also, having a successful exit.
In part, you've got to react to where you can go for money. Why did I take ReWalk Robotics public a number of years ago, for example? It's because it was probably the easiest path, even though it's difficult, that I spend more money on it. I spend time on that instead of really market development more than I'd like to. But it was a pathway that was probably more open to a creative technology that what I was able to deal with was, okay, CMS has been much longer and harder than many would have expected. So I was able to raise the money, not necessarily at good terms, by the way, but I was able to raise the money to get to the end point. So you really have to be flexible in where you're going to go on this, because I went public when a window opened, but the 5 years before there was no window. And right now, actually, despite COVID, the markets have been pretty good for getting some funding. But the period right before it was bad, and I don't know how good it's going to be in the fall. So we've got up and down over the years. So you really have to adjust to your market. But the funding is out there, and you just whether it's strategic or outright investors, they can be found. You just have to be prepared to answer their questions well about an endpoint, because that's where they're going to judge it.
So let's just kind of dig into that just a little bit. What advice do you have? Like, what are some of the important things that you think that the innovator has to have when they're pitching to investors? What are they looking for? What do you, when you're developing that presentation and creating those conversations, what is it that you're making sure that you're communicating really clearly to be able to, motivate people to have the confidence and trust in you that you can do what you say you're going to do?
I think you have to be comprehensive. I mean, that's a hard word to use. If you took a classic product development definition and charted it out, and you'd have a lot of things that range from technology to cost of goods to scale up to regulatory to clinical to reimbursement. I mean, all those categories are going to fall within there. When you're presenting, you have to have those all answered. And I do see too many that come on. They have fantastic technologies, well thought out, well developed, strong intellectual property. Okay, but how does it get over here, and how much is it going to cost, and can it really get paid for, and is the regulatory path going to be an extensive randomized clinical trial, or is it a 510K type of things? Are all, you have to be very well prepared with those answers. And most of my early investment, I think we did that well, and I know where I lost investors the most. And one particularly big, high quality investor that I really would like to have had, and they spent lots and lots of time with me. I mean, they were really fair in giving it to me, but they didn't invest a number of years ago before I went public because they were afraid of reimbursement. They were right. And I knew that was one of my bigger risks. But it was harder than I thought it would take longer than I thought it would take. And they were correct in their assessment. Now, interestingly, they, I believe, have invested since. So they've been a late investor, but I couldn't get them early.
Sure.
But comprehensiveness of and credibility of your answers, you can't make things up. You can't be hopeful. You can't be optimistic. Here's what it's probably going to take for step A, B, C, D, E. And if you can't present that in a business plan, you'll probably lose them somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that the days were ever really there, but I like to say, like, long gone are the days where you could go, oh, well, it's $1 billion market and all we need is 3%.
Well, they used to at least accept, we'll figure that out later.
Yeah.
Let's get this done. It's so good. Let's get it done. Making a paralyzed man walk seems like you shouldn't be very hard to sell, right? Right. But you had to sell it to CMS and to governments and to and private insurers. We're still in that process. And
so you've talked a lot about reimbursement and CMS and how instrumental that was, and you've got some good news to share with us.
Yeah, we worked for many years to build enough data, and by the fourth quarter of last year, we thought we had enough to justify issuing a separate code for exoskeletons. So we did the formal application process with Medicare, Medicaid, and CMS. And it followed with, they initially made a positive recommendation. They held public hearings in June of this year. And about 10 days ago, they issued a formal HCPCS code, which is a billing code that is the start of getting these paid for, formally for this category. I'm particularly gratified they issued the code, but it was also important that the insurers, some of them sponsored and spoke positively about this. We had the same thing with patients. We had the same thing with users in the public hearings. So this is, it's going to change the exoskeleton market now. One that's been sitting, it will start to move. And it's good for our company, but it's also good for the competition. It's good for all of us.
Sure. And this has been a long time in the making. This hasn't happened overnight.
No, and it really, because it was such a small market, we really had trouble building the data, small initial market anyway, that what really helped us was, well, I did sell 600 into the market, so I learned and got a lot of that published. But I'd recognize what the VA did. They took care of soldiers, and they funded, the United States government did a $22 million expensive randomized trial, which is just completing 160 patients. So with 80 of them with our product and 80 of them in a wheelchair, level 1 data. So data was the driver at the end of the day, and the data consistently shows the value of walking, which is intuitive. Back when you were in the early investment side, who's going to fight about the value of walking?
Right.
Who's going to pay for the value of walking is the real question.
Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. So as you kind of indicated earlier, this is a huge milestone that you all have worked really tirelessly for a long time in achieving. And so what does that mean for your company? Is this your fast track to commercialization, or what are some of those other steps that you've got to, or hurdles that you have to get through?
Well, it's a extremely important step, but there's 2 or 3 steps behind it. We've done this exact same process in parallel in Germany. It's just about 2 years ahead. So we got a code issued. We then got pricing and general guidelines issued, and then we started getting contracts. So Germany, if you're a German citizen today, you can get one of these units predictably provided to you. You have to go in and show that you medically qualify. You have to properly train, but the cycle and definitions are all there. So the paralyzed community in Germany can walk in their community and home. It's good. In the United States, we've just crossed the first of those steps. We will now set pricing within some of the new pricing rules that have been put out for durable medical equipment. So there's some new good guidelines there that I think will work. And over the course of the next 12 months, we will start to get contracts. So the United States will become predictable, and that is the end goal.
Sure.
Our company started with a paralyzed inventor, a guy named Dr. Amit Gopher, and his passion and drive was to give back some of the things that he used to have or others had in their life. And we're actually going to achieve our mission at the back end of this, that people can go home, they can stand up and greet people at the door, they can hug their loved ones standing up, they can walk around the kitchen, they can walk in a mall. I mean, it's we're giving something back with them. They could stand up and look at their kids and tell them they need a haircut because they could see them from the above. Those are the kinds of things and stories that we see.
Which is really huge. And I think that in a lot of ways it ties to the broader mission that a lot of us innovators in the industry have, and even the work that I do, is that you have so many people that come up with these incredible technologies that are so needed, but don't have the commercialization expertise or acumen, and then their innovation doesn't get in the hands of the people that need them the most. And so it's really exciting to see you and the work that you all are doing and have that success to really be able to see, not just lives changed because you're generating revenue for a public company, but patient lives changed by getting those innovations and really changing their lives in a very meaningful way.
That probably is the thing that made it easiest for us to fight through this over all these years.
Yeah.
And the employee base is rather passionate because we've gotten attached very much to our customers. There's no distance. I mean, we know about their kids, their wives. I think the biggest thing is we don't just make the person's life better. We tend to affect their entire family.
Right.
Because they interact differently. They get off painkillers, so they're able to interact more. They get more active. Their children see them very differently, and they change. It changes an entire ecosystem, not just a person. So that, I think, was the easiest thing to keep us. Why do we keep doing this when we get hit in the head? No, we won't pay for it again. And until we had the data. And on the positive side, the VA saw this first. CMS did give us a code.
Yeah.
So I complain about it being slow, but they've got it right. So I can't complain about that.
Absolutely. And what an incredible legacy that you all will leave in really being able to change the lives of so many people. It's huge.
Yeah, no, I tell my employees, because each of them have their parts, including me. We've all contributed collectively. When you see someone walking down the street and, that's something we all did together.
Sure. Yeah. So why Germany? How did you choose Germany to be first? How is that part of your, commercialization strategy?
Well, I've had good experiences in the past, and Germany was part of it. But the fundamental reason is they have a particularly good healthcare system. It's one of the oldest commercial systems. It dates all the way back to Bismarck. And it's well structured. And structured has two advantages and one disadvantage. It's a lot of paper and a lot of documentation, but they follow the rules. So the German system is progressive, particularly with the disabled community. And I think one of the leading ones in the world. So it was one that I knew how to do it. And the United States, I sort of knew how to do it, but I would say FDA is pretty clear. You know how to get your clearance.
Yeah.
The payment one, because we have a bit of a fractured system, CMS, the guidelines are reasonably decent. It just takes time. Private insurers, that you don't have clear policies.
Right.
And I do feel there's some discriminatory practices there, not intentionally, but the person who can fight can get a device to be able to walk again. But that's not necessarily the person who would help the most. All the time,
which is so sad.
and having policies in place and predictable ways to make sure the right people are getting it is the right answer. And the Germans are doing that. The VA does it. I think CMS is helping set it up, and the private insurers in the U.S. will get there, but they're the slowest of the group, and that's just the nature of our system. I would say I see CMS and the VA tend to look at long term. These are younger patients. And they think about their health benefits and what this means over 5, 10, 20, 30 years. Yeah. The private insurers tend to look in shorter cycles. And I think that makes it a little bit harder.
Sure. So how do you think your decision to commercialize in Germany first or in parallel with the U.S. market, was that data used in your commercialization path in the U.S.? Were you able to generate revenue and sales, and so that helped fund the work that you were doing here? Help us understand how that impacted the work that you were doing.
The answer is both of the examples you gave are absolutely correct. Initially, what we did in Germany, because I understood the processes as well, and I had some talent over there that I had worked with before. I've been fortunate. Many of my employees have worked in multiple companies with me, so I know what. Like
family.
It's a lot of why I've had success, frankly, more than anything else. But we were able to, the data and things we built and systems we built in Germany, we've replicated in the States. So yes, a lot of what we built was usable across the ocean. Yeah. And Germany will be contributing funds and helping pay the bills before the U.S. does. And in fact, it already is at this point. So our revenue in Germany has grown enough to where now we're able to use that money in Israel, where we do development, and in the United States as we build the market.
That's fantastic. So Larry, as you think about your entrepreneurial career, what are some of the key decisions that you've made that were just game changers for you when you look back in hindsight and you go, wow, maybe I didn't realize when I made this decision that it was going to be so impactful to what we were doing? Help us understand that.
I may have been too young to understand what I was doing in some of those things, but I would say at the beginning of my career, I come back to the two people that started BSC, John Abley and Pete Nicholas. They put me in jobs I didn't really want. And I learned more in those jobs. And I'll be very specific. My interest was really product development. Mm-hmm. And I came to BSC, and for that, for you to work in our marketing and R&D departments, we want you to understand our customer. They made me a sales rep. And I worked in the field for 2 years. I was number 2 in the company. I didn't make number 1, but I tried. But that period helped me realize where customers are illogical sometimes in their decision making. It helped me understand a lot of components. And then I went into some more marketing-driven product development type roles. And then they moved me to R&D. I saw in BSC they chose to push me into places where I didn't plan on going. And having to do a clinical study was not my career goal.
Right.
And even sales wasn't a career goal. But by what I would advise others to do, make sure you get yourself through a few different disciplines because you'll get better overall in putting an organism and building something together. So I'm giving Boston Scientific credit for that because they're the ones who moved me around to all kinds of different jobs before I was running a division there. So that helped. And then small companies were just basically, I was able to use those skills. And I guess the hardest decision was not staying at BSC. And doing it in 3 small companies. And you've got to have a certain kind of mindset for that because it's the funding is different, the infrastructure is different, and frankly, the work's harder.
Yeah.
I think I might have had an easier path staying at Boston Scientific, and I would have been rewarded and they treated me well. But I probably had more fun dealing with the problems that I had to face in these 3 companies I've done.
Yeah. Spoken like a true serial entrepreneur. So also kind of thinking back, what were some of those most challenging moments where maybe you were one paycheck away, from going under? What were some of those most difficult moments and how did you overcome them?
Well, the paycheck away one is probably the most challenging for any of these things when you do it.
And I was just making that up.
I don't think we've been that close, but I guess I went into this with no fear of that.
Yeah.
And if you get stuck in that, you're going to make a mistake. It's okay. Keep doing what you're doing. Fight the battle. You'll win that one. And I have. I've been able to get things funded, but I've also got things finished. So it was a little bit of a confidence of keeping yourself balanced to do all the aspects of your job and not let one part of it overwhelm you. And if you fail, you fail. I've been lucky I haven't, but I'm not done with this one yet, so I don't want to be too it's going the right way.
Yeah.
The difference in running something smaller is you actually have to do all the stuff you do in the big companies. You just don't have the same resourcing. But all the problems, whether it's reimbursement, patents, fundraising, personnel, building a product, cost of goods, collections, data systems, IT, they're all there.
Right.
You do get better. Yeah, you've got to get a lot better at having a lot of virtual support early and not building too quickly. You kind of like, okay, I'll build what I had at BSC. I didn't have that kind of money.
Right, exactly. Reality check. Really quick.
But they're all there. And frankly, I've built a lot of these things early stage. I used a lot of former BSC colleagues as who had gone out to do their own things. So my regulatory was my former regulatory guy, just had his own firm. My clinical was something that, so there, you build an infrastructure and work with it is one of the keys that helped me get past the points that you were talking about. And relative to funding, I had the ability to reach to people I had known in my career. And you just keep networking until you find your path. And that's the essence of what we did.
That's awesome. So anything else that you would want to share with our listeners and viewers before we wrap up today? Well,
this is one I've done mostly in the classroom. If you're an engineer or you're a finance person or whatever your role is, there's many industries out there. I can't tell you that there's one more rewarding than what we do. If you want to deal with the challenges of the medical device industry, it's worth it. And I tend to encourage, particularly the engineering community and other disciplines, to not get enamored with software and other things, which are quite valuable, by the way. But it's a lot more fun building something that works and changes lives. And that's a rewarding part of this business.
That's great. So Larry, for anyone that wants to follow up with you after the show, how do they reach you?
The easiest way is probably just go through the Rewalk website, www.rewalk.com. And I'm quite available. I'm on LinkedIn if people search for me there. For people that are trying to develop and create, I encourage it. And I don't mind giving the time. People gave time to me and helped me, and I owe that to others where I can give good advice anyway. So I guess those are the easiest ways to find me. I'm not that hard to find. I don't hide.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your interest in this too. Bringing these types of things to the public and to the business community is a valuable service and valuable.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and your attention. To save time and get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who's been sharing the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of COIQ.